you can remember back in 1980, 1990, there was a real big conversation that was basically carried on through the front pages of most of America's black and white newspapers and magazines. And that conversation evolved around the issue as to whether or not black males were born with a gene that predisposed us to be violent. You remember that?
Yeah.
Are black men born violent?
Right.
Okay, so the research has shown that when you study groups of black men in native Africa, there's almost no intra-communal violence unless it became necessary, such as war. So they said if black men are predisposed genetically to be violent, then we should see evidence that African men are predisposed genetically to be violent. They saw no such thing. But the Federal Anti-Violence Initiative, in my opinion, was a clever attempt to excuse the United States government for economic castration, miseducation, and the deliberate introduction of self-hatred to displaced Africans, because those are the three ingredients of black on black fratricide. You miseducate them, so they're not able to participate fully in the American social order. Then you economically castrate them. You make them economically irrelevant to black women. And then on top of that, you add the fact that for 4 centuries, we've been taught to hate ourselves and see ourselves as less than. So any program or solution that's going to address black on black male homicide, fratricide, genocide has to deal with miseducation, economic castration, and self-hatred. Now, the white man can't do anything about self-hate, even though he caused it. We have to solve that ourselves. But he can do a lot about miseducation, because most of the education of black children is being carried out by white females. The white woman is the catalyst for the low academic achievement of black males. And when we look at economic castration, which is something that is always left out of the conversation when we deal with black male dysfunctionality, they never connect economics to violence. Whenever they have a conversation about violence, it's all about we need more jails, we need more role models, we need fathers to be in the lives of their sons. But what about the fact that most of the violence is a direct outgrowth of pain, anger, disappointment that grows from not being able to provide for your family? Same thing we saw 75 years ago in America with Jews, Irish, and Italian. They were drunk, they were gang banging, they were running numbers, they were running guns, they was killing each other in the streets. And the United States government upgraded them to white status in 1940, because before 1940s, Jews, Irish, and Italians were not white. And when they upgraded them, that meant they had to give them an economic stimulus package. And that economic stimulus package came to the Italians by way of America's inner city police department. It came to the Irish by way of America's inner city police departments. It came to the Italians by way of America's inner city fire departments. And it came to the European Jews by way of America's inner city civil service jobs. They helped them in their violence by giving them an economic stimulus package. Where is ours?
So we've been hearing a lot about reparations. Where do you stand on reparations as far as the country giving reparations? Where do you stand on that?
I support reparations. We are entitled to it. We will get it. But I do take issue with the fact that we have a lot of not well thought out hashtag grassroots reparations movements that I think can actually hurt what we're trying to do with the reparations crusade, because they're pushing doctrines and ideologies that don't have anything to do with reparations that I think can be harmful in the long term. With that being said, there's 5 things we need to consider when we deal with reparations. 5 concerns I have. Concern number 1, there can be no reparations unless there is restoration. And what I mean by that is America has to give back to Africans all of the land that was stolen from us from 1865 to 1965. Tens of thousands of acres were robbed gunpoint from black folk. They would show up and tell us to get gone. So it's interesting when you look at all this gentrification taking place across the country, white folks moving us out of our neighborhood. Well, how much of that land we being moved off is actually ours? So it needs to be research done to show how much black land was stolen, who was it stolen from, and it needs to be restored. So there can't be no reparations without restoration, because the basis of all nation is land, and we need our land back. And I don't hear anybody talking about the restoration of black lands that was stolen for 100 years at the end of slavery. Number 2, I don't hear enough conversation around the mental costs of the Ma'afa. We understand that they owe us for 243 years of forced labor. But I would argue, psychologically speaking, that the greatest debt of the Ma'afa is not the unpaid plantation labor. The greatest debt from the Ma'afa is the damage it did spiritually and psychologically to African people. Why are black women in love with blonde hair? Why are black men in love with white girls? Why do black people still worship a European deity? All of that are the psychological residuals of slavery. And I believe that the European owes us more for the psychological damage than he could ever owe us for 243 years of cotton picking. On top of that, I don't see enough attention being paid to the Arab involvement in the slave trade. The Arabs were trading Africans before the white man even came around, and the Arab is still trading Africans today. So why are they not being included in this conversation? My next point is I take issue that there's so many different reparations movements. The Caribbean has one. England has one. Africa has one. The United States has one. Last time I checked, there was one slave trade. Last time I checked, we all came from the same place. And last time I checked, the white man is a master of using us against ourselves. And if we do not organize the reparations movement globally behind a united front, he will play each reparations argument against one another, and we will end up with nothing. Last point. We are a $2 trillion people. We are the richest group of Africans in the world. We are the 10th richest nation on the globe. We don't trap any of that money in the community as is. If you got reparations today, the Chinese would be richer tomorrow. If you got reparations today, the Arabs will be richer tomorrow. So before we are looking for a payout, we need to build some infrastructure within the community, political and economic, to trap that reparations money within the community. Because the black dollar rotates once, if it rotates at all, before it leaves. So if we all got a paycheck today, whites, Arab, Asians, and Latinos will be richer tomorrow. I just think we needed to be more visionary with this reparations conversation. We're entitled to it. We should fight for it. We should get it. But we also need to be very careful about how we get it and what we do with it when we get it. So for example, I'm not a big proponent of cash reparations. The reason I'm not a big proponent of cash reparations is because the American dollar isn't backed by any sort of material value. It's not on the gold standard. It's not on the silver standard. It's not even on the damn monopoly standard. So getting the white man's dollars as restitution for your enslavement, to me, is a loss. It is not a victory. So for those who are pushing the reparations movement, I would like to see a reparations demand list, which includes largely things outside of cash. In other words, give me control of certain lands, certain resources, certain waterways, exempt my descendants from taxes, guarantee them all free college, give us control over certain industries. But if all they're going to write us is a check, that's a defeat. That's not a victory. We cannot fall for the dollar hustle. The white man can print all the money in the world, and he can give black people $1 trillion, and then through inflation, he'll take all the $1 trillion back with all his hikes and costs. So that's not going to be a victory. I want resources. I don't want cash.
Yeah, because reparation, what is it? Means to restore.
To restore.
So money is not going to fix
Money
us.
is not going to fix us.
Because we got a lot of rich fools
But
already.
the question is, the reparations organizations, and I don't know, we have to check. I have tremendous respect for the main one, which is in COBRA, National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. Just had their conference in June in Detroit. But we need to ask them, the people who you have thinking this reparations argument up, are these attorneys exclusively? Or are we tapping into all of the deep intellectual wisdom we have in the black community? Or are we relying on a few talented 10th bourgeoisie, white, European, college-educated Negroes to fight this struggle? Because if I see a reparations list that ain't got nothing but a dollar amount, no matter how great, we're going to lose. It needs to be resources on there, opportunities on there, not cash. Because the only thing you do with money is give it away. We need things that we can hold on to.
Absolutely agree with that 100%. So when it comes to that, it comes to a changing of the mind.
Changing of the mind. Which means before you can have external reparations, you got to have an internal reparations. And when I bring this up, a lot of brothers and sisters get upset. There he go again with his psychological talk. But it is true. Until you take the self-hate out of the African, no money will benefit you. Because right now, the #1 motivation for an African is to imitate the European and live next door to the European. So any money you give us will not be used to heal. It will be used to cause further hurt The average black person wants to imitate and mock and ape the life of a white man. So if you give them money, all they're going to do is become a better imitator of a white man. So instead of the Hyundai, it will be a Mercedes. Do you see that? So all they're going to do is buy more expensive white trinkets as opposed to using that money to invest in ourselves. In other words, the worst thing you can do is give a Negropean reparations, because a Negropean will give those reparations right back to the European.
So let me ask you, because but you know, I know you come from a psychology background, and we're sitting there talking about not money. We have to fix the psychological aspect of things. My question is, how do we get our brothers and sisters on the couch? And when I say the couch, it's the proverbial couch, because a lot of times, you know, we watch television, we hear, you know, listen to music, and everything is kind of bringing us through this loop. How do we get our brothers and sisters on the couch to at least begin to help to fix the mindset?
Rule number one, everybody's not going along for the revolutionary picnic. We need to be clear about that. I would argue at least 60% of African Americans today are totally useless and worthless to the liberation struggle. They might be lawyers, they might be doctors, they might be business owners, but when it comes to liberating black people as a priority, they're useless. They have the values of the white man, the psyche of the white man, the interests of the white man. So with that being said, we have to pick and choose. We got to go fishing. Jesus used to say, well, you got to go out there fishing, right? For believers. Well, we got to go out there fishing for Africans who care enough about the people to do something for them. Carter G. Woodson, Miseducation of the Negro, said it best. The college-educated Negro is seldom of any use to his race, because the education he gets educates him away from his people, not towards his people. So one of the hardest lessons I had to learn was everybody not coming for the struggle. I'm a psychologist, right? When we go to therapy, you know what we're taught? So when you sit down, first session, you have to make an assessment on this person's readiness and willingness to change. Some people, they're ready to change. A lot of people ain't never going to change. Some people on the fence, you can convince them to change. That's the same thing we got to do with our people. We got three groups: those who ready to change, those who thinking about it, and those who would never change. They will slit your throat before they get away from the European. We got to pick and choose which ones we want to waste our time with, because trying to save psychologically damaged Africans can be a very dangerous thing. Can be a very dangerous thing because they see you as the enemy.
Right.
You see, so we got to pick and choose who's going, and I really only think about 30, 40 to 50% of us are even worth saving. Frederick Douglass, my ancestor, said what? It is better to raise strong children than to repair broken men. And he wasn't a psychologist, but he knew that. Carter G. Woodson said what? If you control a man's mind, you don't have to worry about his thinking. Okay? And if you control his thinking, you don't even have to tell him to go to the back door. He will go on his own. And when he gets to the back, if there is no door, he won't make one and walk out of it. I'm not